A single light cuts through the Siberian darkness. It's 3 a.m. A train conductor, bundled against the freezing cold, stares at a signal light that refuses to turn green. His train, loaded with T-90 tank hulls from the Uralvagonzavod factory, isn't moving. It hasn't moved for hours. He is one of 700,000 employees of Russian Railways, or RZD, the largest employer in the country, and he is about to be put on mandatory unpaid leave. Thousands of kilometers away, in a Moscow high-rise, an RZD executive stares at a balance sheet. The numbers don't make sense. A 95% drop in profit. A debt of 3.36 trillion rubles. A figure so vast it exceeds the GDP of some nations. This isn't a company in trouble. It's a black hole. At the same time, in a small town outside St. Petersburg, a family with a 3-year-old child is cut off in traffic. A man in mismatched camouflage screams from another car. "I'm from the SMO. I don't give a F." He pulls out a gun and shoots the father. His companion justifies it. "He's from the army. He doesn't care." Welcome. You are not watching 3 separate incidents. You are witnessing the systematic, multi-front collapse of the Russian state. The war has broken Russia's back. And now, in front of Vladimir Putin's eyes, the entire society is falling apart. The financial heart of the empire, RZD, is seizing up. And the heroes he sent to the front are returning home as uncontrollable monsters. If you value analysis that connects the dots, that links a balance sheet in Moscow to a shooting on a dark street, you are in the right place. Support our independent work by subscribing and hitting that like button. It allows us to keep digging for the truth, especially when that truth is this terrifying. Now, let's pull on these threads, starting with the steel guillotine that has wrapped itself around the neck of the Russian regime. The collapse of RZD. For decades, the Kremlin's propaganda machine marketed Russian railways as too big to fail. It was not just a company. In this vast continent, stretching across 11 time zones, where roads are frozen shells or impassable seas of mud, RZD is the state. It is the sole indispensable circulatory system. These steel arteries connect the political heart of Moscow to the industrial muscles of the Urals, the oil-rich veins of Siberia, and the strategic ports of the Pacific. On these rails travel not just people, but T-90 tanks heading to the front, wheat bound for Asia, and the coal that keeps the power plants running in winter. When this network stops, Russia doesn't just slow down, it dies. And it is dying. To grasp why this is a civilizational failure, you must understand what RZD meant to its 700,000 employees. This was never an ordinary company. It was a state within a state, a relic of the Soviet Union. It was a modern feudal system. RZD's own official reports reveal the astonishing depth of this social contract. It didn't just provide a salary, it provided a life. Across those 11 time zones, every employee and their family had unlimited free travel. In the most remote villages, where state hospitals were crumbling ruins, RZD had its own modern, well-equipped clinics. For young families, it offered housing assistance with symbolic interest rates. It was a cradle-to-grave guarantee. It was the last, tangible proof of Putin's promise of stability. Now, the iron gates of this paradise are slamming shut. The war in Ukraine was the final, fatal blow to a system already rotting from within. First, sanctions cut off RZD's most profitable routes. Freight volumes plummeted. The company's net profit vanished, a 95% drop. This financial bloodletting meant tens of thousands of experienced workers were laid off, disguised as mandatory unpaid leave to hide the Kremlin's embarrassment. But the war was just an accelerant. The real disease was corruption. As reports from analysts like the Wilson Center have detailed for years, RZD was the epicenter of Putin's privatization of Russia. A kleptocracy where multi-billion-dollar tenders and opaque subcontracts served one purpose: to turn the state into a cash machine for a handful of loyal oligarchs. This fragile, corrupt structure has now completely collapsed. The company is crushed under that unimaginable 3.36 trillion ruble debt, over $35 billion, and the situation is about to get worse. With Russia's sky-high interest rate now at 21%, RZD is expected to make an interest payment of $7 billion this year alone. How can they possibly pay $7 billion when they only made $30 million in profit in the first half of the year? It's like you making $10,000 a year, and the bank wants the $2 million you borrowed. This is why they are announcing mass layoffs. And no, the state cannot simply bail them out. Putin's government is struggling itself. In 20 seconds, this time-lapse shows how Russia went from being the world's gas station to a 1985-style shortage economy. 84% of regions in Russia are facing gasoline shortages. It's gotten so bad, some stations are selling gasoline mixed with water. This is the economic death spiral. And it's not just the railways, it's the soldiers. As President Eisenhower once said, never trust a promise from a Russian. The soldiers on the front line should have listened. Putin promised them massive bonuses to fight. Now the government is retroactively canceling those promises. In St. Petersburg, authorities canceled 1.6 million rubles in payments for volunteers. The soldiers didn't even get an announcement. They simply didn't get paid. When they called, they were told a law was passed on August 26th that retroactively canceled all payments from August 1st. These men went to the front to become millionaires. They got there and realized the contract they signed was worthless. This betrayal of the soldiers on the front line, canceling their paychecks retroactively, is more than just theft. It is a symptom of a regime that is financially and morally bankrupt, and it connects directly back to the collapsing giant we started with, Russian railways. The RZD is not just failing as a social guarantor, it is failing as a military logistician. The $7 billion interest payment it faces is a black hole that threatens to swallow the entire state budget. Putin cannot just foot the bill. His government is already hemorrhaging cash, dealing with gasoline shortages in 84% of its regions and importing fuel from China. The state doesn't have the revenue to save its crown jewel. This financial collapse creates a terrifying domino effect that paralyzes the war machine. When RZD runs out of money, it can't maintain its locomotives. It can't repair its tracks. It can't pay its 700,000 workers. And that conductor we imagined, stuck in the Siberian darkness with his T-90 tank hulls, isn't just a hypothetical. He is the reality. Russia's entire industrial metabolism, its ability to move tanks from the Uralvagonzavod factory in the Urals to the front lines in Ukraine, depends entirely on RZD. When the network seizes up from lack of funds, lack of maintenance, and strikes from unpaid workers, the war machine grinds to a halt. But the true nightmare is not even on the balance sheet. It is in Russia's vast, cold geography. The core of Russia's industrial and social structure relies on monotowns, monogorods, single industry cities built around one massive state enterprise. Hundreds of these towns, stretching from the Arctic Circle to the shores of Lake Baikal, are RZD towns. Their entire economic, social, and cultural existence is tied, like an umbilical cord, to that single railway line. The town's main street leads to the station. The only hospital belongs to RZD. The school was built for the children of railway workers. When RZD stops paying salaries and begins mass layoffs, these towns will not just enter a recession, they will die. This is not a metaphor. This is a demographic catastrophe in the making. We are talking about the creation of a vast, continent-spanning rust belt of ghost towns. Families who have lost their jobs will be forced to migrate, creating a refugee crisis within Russia's own borders. And this is where the Kremlin's deepest, most primitive fear is exposed. An internal memo, leaked by Ukrainian intelligence services, reveals a chilling order. The RZD management, on the verge of bankruptcy and facing the fury of 700,000 unpaid workers, has launched a large-scale process to equip more than 30,000 of its own corporate security guards with military-grade firearms. Let's pause and absorb the terrifying absurdity of that fact. Why would a bankrupt civilian railway company arm 30,000 men like a private army? This isn't a defense against an external threat. This is the starkest possible confession of a deep, paranoid fear of an explosion coming from within. The Kremlin knows that this social tsunami, 700,000 angry, disillusioned, and organized people who have nothing left to lose, will not be limited to peaceful protests. They are terrified of mass strikes, of railway blockades, of sabotage. These 30,000 armed guards are not security. They are a corporate militia, a private army being created to crush strikes with bloodshed and disperse angry crowds occupying the tracks. This is the moment a state loses all trust in its citizens, and it connects directly to the other monster Putin has unleashed. While RZD arms its guards against its own workers, a different kind of threat is flooding back from the front lines. The heroes Putin recruited from his prisons. When the Kremlin ran out of cannon fodder, it offered a deal to every murderer, rapist, and cannibal in its penal system. Fight for 6 months, and you get a full pardon. They did not think this through, because now those men are coming home, and all they are causing is chaos. This isn't just about traumatized veterans. This is about hardened criminals, given weapons, state sanction, and a newfound sense of invincibility. The story of the veteran in Kamchatka shooting a father in front of his 3-year-old child isn't an anomaly. It's the new normal. His justification, he's from the SMO, he doesn't care, reveals a terrifying truth. These men have been taught that their service puts them above the law. And the numbers are horrifying. Nearly 1,000 Russian soldiers who returned from the front have already become defendants in murder cases. These are not war crimes in Ukraine, which Putin ignores. These are murders committed against the Russian civilian population. The Russian people are terrified. As one social media user wrote, "How many more like him will come back when it's all over?" The Kremlin understands perfectly that these men are a source of destabilization. They are used to easy money, solving problems with weapons, and are completely uncontrollable. This reveals Putin's ultimate diabolical trap. He is trapped by his own creation. He cannot end the war, because if he does, these uncontrollable, armed, and furious veterans, both the unpaid professionals and the pardoned criminals, will flood back home and trigger the very internal collapse he fears. He needs the war to continue, simply to have a place to dump his most dangerous and disposable men, but he can't afford to pay them, and RZD can't afford to supply them. The system is eating itself. This, then, is the twin collapse. On one side, the economic heart of the empire, the RZD, is seizing up, paralyzed by a 3.36 trillion ruble debt and the quiet fury of 700,000 unpaid workers. On the other, the social fabric is being torn apart by the very heroes the state created, monsters returning from a war built on lies and funded by corruption. And while Russia bleeds men, money, and equipment, it is also bleeding something far more valuable: its future. The ultimate sign of this collapse isn't in the RZD balance sheets or the veteran crime statistics. It's in the quiet, desperate exodus of Russia's brains. Putin may find another 1 million men for the front line, but he has a very, very small reserve of engineers, computer experts, financiers, and scientists. And they are leaving. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the exiled oligarch, proposed a simple, brilliant strategy: the Berlin Declaration. It suggests that any Russian who wants to leave must publicly declare 3 things: the war is criminal, the regime is illegitimate, and Crimea is Ukraine. In exchange, the West offers them a path to a new life. This organized brain drain would devastate Putin's war machine more than any missile strike. You need engineers to design tanks. You need computer experts to run cyber warfare. You need financiers to navigate sanctions. If a few 100,000 of these key people were given a way out, Putin's war machine wouldn't just stop, it would lose its deadly efficiency. This is the final, irreversible rupture. Putin has not only broken the social contract with his people, promising stability but delivering chaos, he has broken his nation's future. The war launched for imperial glory has created a vast, continental-sized ghost town. The ticking of this time bomb, fueled by hunger, anger, and despair, can now be heard from Moscow to the farthest corners of Siberia. And its explosion is no longer a question of if, it is only a matter of when. What do you think? Is this the beginning of the end for the Putin regime? Or will this brutal crackdown be enough to keep the population in fear for another decade? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.